Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. Mining's contribution to the Botswana economy was a key theme at the 13th Botswana Resource Sector Conference. Mining Weekly editor Martin Creamer tells us more. Welcome, Martin.
Thanks, Leandi.
Martin, an economist has suggested that Botswana's days of mineral-led growth was over. What does this mean for exports?
Well, this was a big shock at this conference. It was a very sort of down-to-earth explanation of what's going on in Botswana. And many people sort of thought, wow, we didn't know that it was this bad. But what is happening in Botswana is that there's been quite a change in the scenario in the last 5 years. Not only has the diamond market disappointed the country because the demand hasn't been great and they've had to cut back on production. But also, you have a situation there where they've introduced beneficiation, and that is also creating a few complications. So he was saying, gone are the days when the mining industry can be expected to just offer all the growth. And this is the Econsult economist Keith Jeffress, and he knows that economy very, very well, and he's been speaking at these conferences yearly for a long time. But his message this year was that those days are over, because if you look at Botswana, which is the biggest company producing diamonds there, which is partly owned by the state, which is partly owned by De Beers. It's a 50-50 joint venture, one of the most successful public-private partnerships in the history of Africa, and has been doing fantastic things for the economy of Botswana over the years, and really means that the partnership structure sends 80% of the profits into the economy of Botswana, and they have been using that $50 billion that they've got over 40 years for doing good things. I mean, it's not as if they wasted the money. They've put it into infrastructure, they put it into roads, they put it into dams, they put it into education. They spend 25% of their budget, on education. But that is also, in the current circumstances, coming back to haunt them, because you've got like 20,000 students, 15,000 to 20,000 matriculants coming off into the economy, and there's only jobs for 2,000 of them. They also used to have this policy of sending 200 people into the world university realm every few years. The top universities, their top students would go into the top universities, Harvard and all the Oxfords and all the other you could think of, and then these people come back as highly qualified people, but what do you do with them? And this is becoming a problem. They didn't expect the economy to shrink to this thing. They really thought by now it would be growing and galloping, and that they would have a totally different scenario with a lot of services added. But the services have come with problems, because the main exporter is still the diamonds. That's where you're getting your main revenue from, and that's where mining is so important. You can find that it doesn't actually add too many jobs, because if you look at the Botswana case, it's so mechanized. I mean, it's a mechanized business, so that you can even expand there and you don't add many jobs because it's capital intensive, not labor intensive. So all sorts of interventions have led to this situation where mining is now actually subtracting from the growth of the economy, and those services that came in are not adding to exports. So it's more of an internal situation. And then you've got an importation burden, because the moment you say to London, hey, we're going to aggregate, the days of London being the center of gravity for diamonds is over. It's come to Gaborone. It sounded great. But what happens is, when your mining industry goes down, your diamond market goes down, all of a sudden you are duty bound to import these diamonds. So you've got to pay for that importation from South Africa, from Canada, from Namibia. That then means that your balance of payments goes out. And it's only after 7 years now, there were 7 years of negative balance of trade. So the balance of trade is only now come into surplus, which is a bit of a plus. But you can see that it's not so easy to run an economy, even when a government is so deeply involved in it, as the Botswana government is.
And then how is Botswana's diamond cutting and polishing industry performing?
Well, this was the great hope. They said, we can beneficiate. London, listen to us. You bring that to Gaborone. Set up this beautiful aggregation building, marvelous, overlooks the city, and you feel, well, this is great. But there is a downside to this, because it's fine when the market's going well. But if you suddenly have a situation where the supply chain of your diamond business is underfunded, that banks that were supplying credit to that have gone under. Other banks are reluctant to get involved. You realize that there can be complications for the value that you add. So the purpose of this was to add value to the diamonds. Instead of just benefiting from the rough sales of rough diamonds into the world, you now not only sold those rough diamonds into the world, but you kept some back, and you also brought in from South Africa, Canada, and Namibia, and elsewhere in Africa. They would also be responsible to do that. You've got to pay for that importation. So then you go along and you cut and you polish and you add value, and you think, well, I'm going to add value. This is really, I'm adding value here. All of a sudden, as you add those polished diamonds onto the market, because of the problems in the supply chain, there's an oversupply and the price falls. So all of a sudden, the difference between the price of the rough and the polished is not that great. And also you have a situation where, because the market is down in the polished sector, your site holders, who are also a key part of this, the three key factors are the Botswana government, De Beers, and the site holders. The site holders are the buyers of those diamonds. Now they come in from the rest of the world, which was also meant to be a great spin-off, because you've now got tourists coming in, you've got that added benefit with the services and the new hotels, all that sort of thing. But when the market's down, people don't want to buy diamonds. So you might have a whole lot of polished diamonds there waiting in their box for them to come and collect nice and secure. They don't come and collect because they don't want them. So then, all of a sudden, you in Botswana, your economy is strained with a surplus of polished diamonds, not rough diamonds now, polished. So you have spent that on the polished diamonds, and there's not a huge demand. So when the market sees a build-up, the price falls. Then it makes it even worse. So you've seen, they have had 2 diamond cutting businesses go under. They have others in a mentality of liquidation, retrenchment, downsizing. They've got 20 left. Now they're even saying, should we have 20 or should we have 10 or should we have 30? What is they're having to rethink this. And it just shows you that, governments can intervene in your economy for good intention. But if the world market changes, it can put that government on the back foot. And we see that is the situation now in Botswana.
And then the country's water and energy challenges were also discussed at the conference. What plans do they have in place to address these?
Well, the minister who came and addressed us at the conference assured us there'd be no load shedding there. But we did notice we got through it. But he's desperate for more energy, desperate for more water. And the Marapuli power station, they decided to expand that in Botswana. Now it's state-owned. Like we've got Eskom here. They've got the BPC there, Botswana Power Corporation. So it's also state-owned. And they embarked on an expansion of the Marapuli. And this sounded fantastic. It is fantastic if it works. If it doesn't work, you're in serious trouble. And it's the same as our Kusile and Madupi that have been so badly delayed. Hopefully when we switch those on, they'll actually produce electricity, because when they try to switch on at Marapuli, it produced no electricity. So, that really puts you on the back foot. Same time, water. They're short of water. They need to actually make sure that the groundwater that they're taking out is not overdone, that you don't take out too much. Otherwise, you end up with a negative situation of using too much and it's not replenished by the rains. So they're going all out to make sure that they use their water very, very sparingly. And they were keen on also doing a bit of a sassle in that country, because, you've got the coal. So they thought, well, we could actually produce petrol, diesel, and chemicals here from the coal. Now people are saying that the coal to liquids route is capital intensive to a point where it doesn't beat the gas to liquids route. And also the water that you require for that process is excessive to a point where I believe Sasol has decided not to get involved because of constraints. The carbon to liquids and the water situation seems to have put them off. So that's another constraining factor now in the vision that they had.
And then lastly, Martin, coal is seen as a big hope for Botswana, but is it living up to expectations?
Coal was the big hope. 5 years ago when I went to these conferences, it was just coal. And one imagined that there would be some activity now that would have shown you that all that effort was worth something. But there were a lot of juniors in there, well-meaning juniors, But of course, when you've got the coal price falling through the floor, it's another story. You've also got a landlocked country. Of course, they're all saying now it's not landlocked, it's land-linked. And of course, they mean that there is a value proposition there, because instead of actually having to rail that coal out and pay a lot of money for putting in the rail at a time when coal is depressed, when there are a lot of things against coal, you could actually burn the coal in power stations and then send that coal, as it were, out as electricity. And, we know that this region is short of electricity. You've got Zambia wanting more electricity, you've got Zimbabwe wanting more electricity, you've got Namibia wanting more electricity, and you've got South Africa needing like 21,000 extra megawatts. So there is already negotiation with our Department of Energy, because our Department of Energy in South Africa called for bids. Now you can see some of the companies have put bids in. So this vision of actually beneficiating coal to a point where you turn it into electricity and send it over the border is actually starting to gain momentum. And we saw that one of the juniors there has set up with a big major to get the funding to do that. But if you look at coal versus diamonds, now diamonds has always given them, the great big start that they had when they had this joint venture with De Beers, and it's worked very, very well. Okay, it's run into a problem now, and why the economist is saying that it won't ever contribute in the same way is that Botswana has a plateau of production. So if you've got production staying as it is over a period, you don't have that growth. So you can't rely on that growth. So if you go to coal, then you find that the margin of profit in coal is nothing like the margin in diamonds. So it's a different scene. We've also seen that the copper, at one stage they thought, they were even saying, we could be the new copper belt, we could be the new big supply of copper in Africa. Well, we've seen that Discovery is in liquidation. It's the price hit it at the wrong time. We do see that a bid will be made this week. I think by tomorrow it'll be known whether a new company has taken over. But it's not the dripping roast that people thought. And that's why a lot of the speakers said, hey guys, let's not wax lyrical about how fantastic this treasure chest is in Botswana. Let's work smart, because we haven't really got, we're not endowed, I'm not talking about diamonds, but in other commodities with such fantastically rich, ore bodies. So we're going to have to work smart. And that is a better mentality for them to have, be real and see what can be done, because there are going to be opportunities. This great darkness that always gets very dark before the dawn. And it's starting to get pitch black at the moment. So we're hoping the dawn will be out there soon. But we know that things change, particularly in this commodities market. We see that urbanization around the world is going to create a demand in the future for, the metals and minerals that we produce. But in the meantime, I think we need to learn. This is when you learn your lessons, when things are really hard. And those lessons we should take when things start improving, and make sure we don't forget what sort of problems you can have when the market turns against you.
Thanks for speaking to us, Martin.
Great pleasure, Leandi.
That's it for today. Join us again next week for more news analysis on South Africa's mining industry.